librarian put into my hands. I was with my friend Rose down in Garrison, and at that library, I was given a book by an American journalist, Russell Shorthill, who had written a fabulous book on Amsterdam, the history and the cultural story of Amsterdam, which combined with Anne Frank made me want to have my feet on the cobblestones of Amsterdam, breathing the air of that incredible city. And so when I took about 520 photographs. So what you're going to see here are 86 slides, maybe at best 2, in one case 3 photographs on a page. So you have to understand it's a bit of a skeleton, and we'll go day by day. So that was my beginning inspiration. And so I'm going to move forward. Now, as I said, these were the, and he was an American journalist in charge of the John Adams Society in Amsterdam. And he wrote a book about the Dutch influence at the tip of Manhattan in the early years before the English came in around 1674. And they have discovered a lot of papers now that were deep sixed by the English at that time that have been translated from 17th century Dutch script, which is not an easy task. So there's a lot of history here. Okay. Now, I did this because I wanted to keep it organized. There were tricks of the trade of travel that I knew nothing about. A friend of mine said, make it a hobby. Make your research a hobby. So I created a folder with all kinds of links that I went back and forth to. Rick Steves, whose book is also on the table, was a great source of information, partly because of handling money. And what I learned from Rick Steves may help you all. And that has to do with, if you're in a country, let's say, where there are euros or whatever the money is from a country, use that country's money for everything except purchases of $50 and more. Use your debit card. That way you're not subject to all the different rates that different stores and restaurants might put on your card. Use your debit card also at banks only, so you don't lose your card. And if you do lose it, the bank is open and you can go in and get help for getting more of the money that you need. I traveled with $300 initially worth of euros, which of course was about $375 considering the exchange rate. And you can only do this at federal banks like Chase and Wells Fargo. So he was a tremendous source for me of how to handle money, because that was something I definitely needed help with. Let me see if this is going to move quickly enough. Yeah. Now, I mentioned here purchasing a waist pouch. What I'm wearing now is something that was extremely helpful because every important paper, health cards, debit cards, cash, and even a record, a record to your passport information, a photocopy, which hopefully you give to someone at home should you lose your passport. That's a very good idea. The main page. This is worn under the clothing, okay, women and men. I took nothing around my neck. I was wearing no jewelry but these earrings and a very simple bracelet. And anywhere you go, you want to be safe. Amsterdam has got to be one of the safest, but still there are issues. And with this, I could get money out, cards out, whatever I needed, and feel safe, despite the fact that there's a little black pack back there that I used over my shoulder, across the body, for maps, for water bottle, for sandwiches, etc. And one thing which you're not going to see here is that I went to Albert Heijn, which is a grocery store chain, and purchased food for my hotel refrigerator, which saves money because then you can really enjoy a dinner now and then in one of the local restaurants, which is a great experience wherever you're going. But this way you have some extra little food and drink with you, and you can feel secure in that. And even medicine, the hotel was able to keep for me in the refrigerator. So I had to travel with eye drops for dry eye. So here we go. And then I was warned to bring a nice sized zippered little purse For the change, when it comes to euros, you can get $2 coins, which are very large. So you have $5, 10, 50, whatever in the paper money. And when they change that, you're going to get a lot of coin back. So for traveling. And the other thing is, and I'm telling you, I'm being verbal now before the pictures so you can get an idea. Very important, buy museum cards and buy travel cards that would allow you to get on and off things and in and out of museums without waiting on lines and saving you money in travel. Otherwise, in Amsterdam, it's $2, and then you have about an hour to get back on a bus to go back for that $2. Otherwise, it's another $2. So you want to buy cards to get in and out of places. Those purchases are good with debit cards, and you can get them almost anywhere. So, okay, I traveled light. I didn't want luggage. I only wanted carry-ons. And it was a little bit of a squeeze. But in this pink one was the satchel that I was going to use daily, stuffed in there, with all kinds of electronic equipment like cell phones, chargers. Don't forget your chargers and your country exchange charge. And then I had no idea that I would have to walk over a mile to get from gate 1 to gate 33, which was where the plane would take off. And it was a struggle, even though they have, and I'm not sure that this has a beam. Does this have a beam? No. I wasn't sure if, despite the traveling escalator, which is level, you have to stay to the left to let everybody run past you if you're not moving quickly. And here's a warning. I met a gentleman who wanted to help me. So what did he take? He took my lightest bag, the pink and black one. And he moved quickly ahead of me, and I had to run to keep up with him. By the time and he was telling me he was going to the same place because I foolishly told him where I was going. When we got to gate 33, I needed to use the restroom. He was going to be generous and watch all my bags. And at that point, I already had a horrible feeling, and I took both of them, thanked him very much, took them into the restroom with me. When I got back, that man was nowhere to be found. But at the same time, everything of importance was around my waist. So you can see the advantage of having these packs. Okay.
What airport did you fly out of?
I'm sorry.
What airport?
Oh, JFK. And I hadn't experienced that airport in decades. It was huge. Couldn't even read the signs above to find my plane. Felt very anxious, of course. Got there a little late because the driver, and it's very expensive getting a cab from our area to any of the airports. It can be $25 to $30, $200 to $250 just to go one way and come back. So that's about $500 of your hard-earned cash. So there are buses out of New York if you go in to Manhattan, Lexington, 41st, around that 41st Street in Lexington. They have bus terminals that will take you to any terminal at JFK for a lot less money. I haven't done it yet. I'm considering it for any further future trips. Also, if you have difficulty walking, let's say you're not disabled, but this is a long walk, you have the right, when you go the night before online to get your boarding pass, they give you the option to ask for a wheelchair. You don't really need a doctor's note. You just say, yes, I would like a wheelchair. They have them right away. You go to that area, someone pushes you through customs to the gate, and they have one waiting for you coming home. So this is a real advantage for those of us who have difficulty with long distances, dragging things with us. So I caution you to think about doing that. I decided to watch and track on the airport the progression. When I first thought about this, I thought, oh my God, how am I going to go that far in a plane over the ocean? Oh, this is scary. You know, I'm a different person than I was at 25. Nothing phases you, but you can see we're making progress. And here we are, we're over Amsterdam. Now, there was a man sitting next to me. I took an aisle seat for restroom activity, so I would not have to bother people. And you can do that in advance, okay? I had to catch the first sights of land. And I believe that this is the Amstel River, which made the name Amsterdam, because the Dutch, and we're going to get into this, are such ingenious people. Naturally, they learned how to hold back the sea, because they have increased their landmass 2 times what it was 400 years ago by their knowledge and technology. And they used dams, of course, and the Amstel River feeds into Amsterdam as the major canal, off of which all the other canals work in concentric circles. It is very hard to think straight lines, grid, because now you're in a circular situation and you have to find your way. But there are apps for all countries now, all cities, where you can get walking maps and information like that. So that was my first shot, and I could see from the land that they seemed to be quite in touch with nature. Oh, sorry, did the wrong thing here. Okay, I get there at about 11. I also secured a car. You can do it there. I secured a car to take me to the hotel. I wasn't taking any chances with having to figure things out. And this is the view. I had a top floor attic roofed room, which was so charming, and I could look out on 2 directions. And here I was looking at the gabled roofs and the cobblestone streets of Amsterdam, the beginning of my dream trip. And I am very emotional about this. It was such a joy to be there. And it isn't just Amsterdam, it's any country you have a feeling, a connection to. So I was going to take a nap, forget it. I got on the street immediately, took a shower, got dressed, asked the hotel concierge, where's a good little restaurant? They directed me 2 streets away. And before I went in, I took some shots of the canal. This is the Prinsengracht Canal. Grats mean canals, and straats mean streets. And the Prinsengracht Canal was a 25-minute walk from the Anne Frank house, where I was going to be going the next day. With Anne Frank, you book no less and no more than 2 months before the date you want in, because that's when they open that day. And that's when you book online for Anne Frank, and you print out your ticket, and you take that with you. So, I didn't walk there, though. I took buses. And then I went to Mirabella's for my first meal, little cafe, bar and grill, you know, like we have here, and ordered an egg sandwich on Dutch bread. I could have had 3 eggs, but I thought that was a little much. And what you don't see is a glass of white wine that I made sure to celebrate my arrival. And here is some of the money, the larger one being the $2, the next in size, I think, was 1. And then 50 cents. So you can see the purpose of a purse at this point. And you leave, you know, they don't look for tips, but I left tips. You know, I'm trained. Okay, the view on the left was a young couple so much in love that I had several photographs of them. Now, I understand legally you're allowed to photograph people in public places. It's only if you're in a private environment that you have to ask permission. I hope, by the way, you folks don't mind. I meant to mention Joe Donato, who's the head with his wife of the Dance Depot in part of the Hudson Valley dance community. And Joe has been kind enough to come here and do this filming of the PowerPoint and possibly some other things. And you might be on film, so if you have any objection, please let us know.
No,
I have to, huh?
If you don't want to be filmed, raise your hand now.
Oh, yeah, there you go. There you go. Thank you, Joe. And on the right is really not a very meaningful photograph, because I must admit LaGrange Library did not want me to show the window selling cannabis, you know, pot, marijuana, whatever you want to call it. But we all know that the Dutch government has been very smart in legalizing only a certain amount of it to be sold at one time in any one place. And they did that to cut back on crime, where we have so many people using pot who are in jail, and we're paying for their jail time. So they've been very smart about it, and they've done the same thing with prostitution, and it's monitored, and the women are checked for STDs. And I think, and that exists, the red light district in Amsterdam exists in every city in Holland. So I think they've been very smart about it. And talk about liberalism, there's more to come about that. And that book by Russell Shorto is called Amsterdam, the Most Liberal City, and he explains what he means by that. So this picture doesn't have much meaning to me, and I'm so sorry I couldn't put it back in without taking. Okay, this is my second full day, and I'm ready to go. If you offer to take a picture of tourists so that they all can be in their picture, they will take a picture of you. And I learned to do that. This was my first day heading out to the Anne Frank house. This was the worst weather day. It was chilly and rainy, but who cared? And people were waiting online for over an hour in that weather. I didn't have to do that because I had my ticket. I was so in love with the idea of being at Anne Frank's house that I took several pictures of the door until I came right up to it. If I could have stepped into the door, I would have done that, but that's not the way in. Maybe there's still paint from the old time when she was there, I don't know. But this is the Westerkerk Tower. I had many pictures of this church. Kerk means church in Dutch. And this is the church where they heard in the annex the timing, the bell chimes, telling the hour that connected them to the outside world. This was a book. I realized I couldn't buy every book I wanted to bring home because it would have been too heavy. So I took pictures of this was written by someone who works at the Anne Frank house. So that was really great for me. And then I went up to the cafe. I spent 3 hours because there's a museum and the annex. You go up into the annex and there were pictures. You couldn't take pictures in there, but you can see a virtual tour online of the Anne Frank house. I went and took my first hot chocolate at cafe, looking out at the Prinsengracht Canal from the house, and they included this little package which is called a stoofwafel. Stoofwafel is like a little pancake cookie with caramel in the middle, and you can buy it at Adams also in packages both small and large, and you hold it over a hot drink. Don't rest it there because it's going to drop in. You hold it over the hot drink so that the caramel will melt a little bit, and you have a wonderful, wonderful experience. Behind the Anne Frank house was the homosexual monument, or homo monument. And on the tip of that beautiful marble extension into the canal were flowers placed there. So I was happy to see that. Now I asked the bus driver that I got on a bus or tram, you can get on a tram, where there was a good place to eat. And she said, well, right at Rembrandt Square, and I'll let you know. All my research never revealed Rembrandt Square. It's not where he lives, but it is, he actually had a house in the Jewish Quarter. That's why so many of the people in his etchings are from the neighbors and the people who lived and worked in that area. This is a statue of him, and this is his night watch translated into iron statues. Every figure in the night watch is placed in this square for a terrific photo op. And you can see how fabulous they are. And if you ever look at that painting, you'll see every character, including the dog. So, taking pictures of others, and these children are in there too. And his picture represents the guards and the regular citizens who would come to the defense of the city. That's why they have muskets. And this is how they dressed. And this was my boyfriend that I met in Amsterdam and had a picture taken with him. He was the right size. And I took pictures of others, and they took this for me. And on leaving on leaving that square, I went in search of a restaurant. They were all around the square, big restaurants, cafes. It's not what I wanted. So with serendipity, I discovered down a little alley a restaurant that turned out to be the favorite of the locals. And this is what it was. And I ordered for $7, you know, 6-something euros, an incredible fish stew with scallops, salmon, and mussels in a tomato-based sauce with potatoes covered with dill or parsley and other accoutrements. And I had, for the first time, a mint tea. And they're not kidding. It's hot water with tea, with mint leaves upside down in the glass, which I had the whole time I was there. It was fabulous. It infuses the water with the flavor of the mint. So it's all a matter.
What's the name of that restaurant?
The name of it, you know, I think I might have something on it in the memorabilia box, but I failed to actually get the name at the time. And I went back a second time and had the same meal because it was unbeatable. So there we go. And this is, we have these here too, but they show you the bike paths. You've got to be a little careful. Everything is pink. So you're not sure you're in a walkway. You have to be aware that there are cars and bikes, and then there is a place to walk next to the buildings. But unfortunately, eager to take photographs, I forgot and got honked a few times, you know, and moved out of the way. But these people, the Dutch, learned to, the Netherlanders, they learn to ride bikes from a very young age, and they take all kinds of chances. They go around huge trucks, you know, and manage safely to get around with oncoming traffic, so go figure. And with babies on the back, no helmets. And I must tell you, these people are extremely tall people. I felt like a midget in the land of the giants. Not true during the war years when they had famine, of course, when the Nazis occupied. But those are the shortest generation. But since then, they eat very well and they do well. This was my third day. The Jan Six house, and where my travel agent helped me, you had to apply. Jan Six was a famous merchant, the most wealthy of in the 16th and 17th centuries, and he was a friend of Rembrandt's, and he was a patron. Rembrandt did one of the most definitive portraits of him, which is shared between this house of the forebears, of the family that came after Jan Six, and they still carry the name, and they are art dealers, and they have kept the house with the fortune of art through marrying. For instance, Jan Six married the surgeon, Dr. Tulip, who features in Rembrandt's painting The Anatomy Lesson. And his daughter married Jan Six and brought with her her fortune and collections. They traveled extensively, bringing back other things. This house is a landmark treasure which has been supporting itself until recently when the Netherlands Cultural Society took share in it, which forces them to open their doors at least once or twice a week to the public, even though they live there. So to get access, you have to apply. I gave them my background and my travel agent because they said they had no openings till March of 2018, and I was going to be there in October of 2017. She's the one who was smart and asked them, after I requested and explained to them my background and why I wanted to be there, she asked for a wait list, for me to be put on a wait list. The next morning at work, I opened my cell phone and saw that they had sent me an email accepting me in on October 12th. I was so overjoyed, they thought I'd gone nuts at work. And they even invited someone else, but I had no one else to bring with me, so, you know, I went. And then, this is the Amstel Canal. And
which house is it, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's called the Jan Six house.
Is it the white with the red?
Oh, you're gonna see it in a moment. Let me move on, and I'm sorry if you think I'm giving too much detail, raise your hands.
No, it's good.
Okay, all right. I did a picture of the cobblestones. You know, things hold memories, I feel. And to look at the street and to walk on those streets was to feel I was back in the heyday, the golden age of Amsterdam, when they first dug the canals by hand. They didn't have the equipment to do it. Everything was done on pilings because it is marshy land. Buildings, the walls of the canals, everything was supported by long maple wood that was thrust into the marshy land, brought back up, and then technically put back in. So most everything is slightly angled if it wasn't on high land. It's beginning to slope, the way some things are in Manhattan, you know. So here is the front. It's number 218 Amstel, and it is the Jan 6 house. These houses were broader. You paid taxes based on the width of your house. So most of the houses are quite narrow with very narrow staircases. If you ever choose an Airbnb lodging in one of the houses, be aware if it's a top floor, you're going to be going up narrow stairs. And most of us at a certain age can't do that. But in these houses, they were quite broad with gardens in the back. So he was a very wealthy merchant. We went in for viewing in the bottom door down there. And here's another view, and you see he had at the very top the very usual extensions along with those gables. He had the extensions that we used to hoist the goods that they brought back from world travel, because as we all know now, the East and West India companies started in Amsterdam. So did the stock exchange and the concept of buying a piece of business. So they got a lot of low-income people buying stock who benefited in the end from the success of their world travel, bringing back spices and other things, and became very wealthy people. So you had a large wealthy population. They never had to get off the water. They'd come in through the North Sea to the harbor. They'd get onto their canal boats. They'd travel to their homes. They would get off there to enter into the home in the front, but the goods were hoisted up to the attic where they kept their goods. And the stores were really on the main floor. The second floor was the home, and the very top floor was the warehouses where they kept their goods. So they had they still use these hoists today. And across from the Jan 6 house, I didn't realize was the Hermitage Museum. Catherine the Great in Russia created the Hermitage. Then they built, over the years now, they've built satellite Hermitages, and this is the largest one that was ever built in any of the European countries. And it was holding a wonderful exhibit of portraits by Dutch painters that had been purchased in the 17th century by wealthy Russians, brought back to the Hermitage. When I was there, I never got in. 6 days, I forgot to tell you, 6 days and 7 nights is not a long enough time to see everything you might. It's exhausting. And I walked almost everywhere at the time. And there's a little drawbridge in the back over the Amstel River, and this is a closer view of the Hermitage. On my walk back that morning, I saw wonderful things. Walking is one of the best ways to see Amsterdam. It's a 16th century city, and at that time there were no buses and cars or trams or even bicycles back then. But it was made for canal boats and walking, and so you get a real sense of things. Here were some just details that I wanted to capture. That wooden painted front, I think I have, it actually has tools of the trade of whatever business was there. It looks like someone was an architect. It had a triangle and various tools of the trade. And this is a closer view of that, and a wonderful little detailed head. I can't tell you what that was about. And even though these are flowers, they don't come up nearly as bright as what I have on my screen here. Unfortunately, they were bright fuchsia. And I couldn't resist. The next picture is Amsterdam at dusk. That is the magical time. And because it was October, dusk came between 5 and 5:30. And of course, you'd still be out. This is the time of reflections in Amsterdam into the canals. Again, you're not getting the brilliant light and reflection that I'm seeing on my screen, unfortunately. But I took several shots of the canal, which I blew up and framed and put in my apartment. So there's now that on the right. Again, it doesn't have the brilliance, but the lamppost is important. Jan van der Heyden created these streetlights. He was a child when he did a few things. He was a child when they had a fire, which burnt many of the wood buildings. And he developed, as a young man, a system of fire trucks and water to fight fires. He also developed the lampposts, of which there are 2,556. And he did this with the kind of work that we do in shops, where there are multiple people doing different jobs. And he created that to create these lampposts. And I didn't realize when I looked at it that this was one of his lampposts. And I didn't take a higher picture of the lamp itself because there were signs, and I wanted to keep it as, old as I could. So forgive me, that was what I did there. So that's Jan van der Heyden, and the books that I'm referring to talk about him. I went to a doctor because my ears had bothered me on the descent, and he had me chew gum, drink lots of water on the return trip, and he gave me a script at a drugstore for a nasal spray to use before going and on the plane. And believe me, it helped. A lot of people suffer with congestion that causes that excruciating pain. I wasn't prepared for it. Now, I'm sorry. Before I thought myself to take a photograph of my herring sandwich, I had bitten into it. Of course, the pigeons keep you company when you sit down. Rick Steves talks about the herring. The history of Amsterdam is built on the herring trade. And there was a kiosk near to the Anne Frank house that was closed because I got out too late. Talks about it on a walking tour, that very kiosk. I happened, fortunately, to get back to that area on another day, and immediately ran over to the kiosk and asked for a herring. And he said you could take it plain or in a Frankfurter roll with chopped onion and little circles of pickles. I am a big herring, and I eat sardines and herring, which is raw, but kept in a kind of brine to, it put Amsterdam on the map. And they learned to gut the herring so they could keep it longer and send it across the ocean to all their colonies, to Europe and everywhere. And herring put them on the map 400 or 500 years ago. So how could I not sample the herring? Okay, then you buy a canal boat ticket. You can do a 2-day thing on and off. You get on, you can get off, see something, get back on, go somewhere else. If you have enough time, it is a great way. This was a closed boat, but I eventually got onto an open one. And this was the Portuguese synagogue, which I had hoped to get into, but unfortunately, I dilly-dallied elsewhere, and when I got there, they closed the doors. It was a high holy day, which I, being Jewish, had forgotten, and they couldn't let anybody in. And I did get back to the area on another day, but it wasn't open that day. So I didn't get in there, but I got into the Museum of History of the Jews in Amsterdam, very next door to it, which had its own synagogue. And they had students there, and I sat and talked with the students for a while, and then went into the museum, which talks about, of course, in the end, it talks about the Nazi occupation and what happened. And I have to say that the beautiful Central Station, Station Central, was where they crowded, not to ruin your trip, but they crowded the people they were sending to concentration camps, what they called work camps at the time. They crowded them in there, and from there they got on trains to go. Now they have beautiful trains, electronic, and a beautiful station, and you can go anywhere in Europe from that station. and you can get there from the airport. And I took a trip, but I'm going to show you more sites. This is the Diamond Museum. Most of the people got off the boat to go there. I wasn't planning it, so I didn't go. And this other, because of the enormous bike traffic, they have bike garages for people who are traveling back and forth from work. So the Diamond Works and a bike parking garage. This was a hotel that I thought was amazing, and I photographed it. On the right is a tower with the flag of Amsterdam, which existed in the 17th century. And there were postcards and prints everywhere of this tower. And you may see it again. Okay, this was my day to go to the museum, and I knew my friends wanted pictures of me, so I made sure to take a few. And this guy on a bike, I had crossed the avenue and I walked there from the hotel because it was well located, centrally located. And I was heading toward the Rijksmuseum, which means State Museum, where all the Vermeers, the Howes, the Rembrandts, you could spend a week in the Rijksmuseum. However, I stopped to take a picture of this because I was informed that how clever it is, because at night the CDs reflect light, the lights of the cars, whatever. So this guy would be very safe on the roads at night. So I thought it was, brilliant. Anna at the Lagrange Library realized the purpose of these CDs, and she said, that Jayne, that's going to reflect light. I never thought of it. Okay, this is the Rijksmuseum. It means state, and I've told you everybody that's in there, but the back of it gives out on Museum Plain or Museum Square, which is the actual location of the Van Gogh Museum and the Stedelijk Museum, which is the Modern Art Museum. I was heading to the Van Gogh Museum, so I didn't stop at the Rijks, but, and this is a frieze, a little closer view. Okay, this is the passageway through to the open air area where the other museums are. And this fellow made an accordion sound like a grand piano. Could I not give him a tip? $2 a coin went into his little thing. He was so talented, so brilliant. And on Thursdays they had jazz music scheduled every Thursday in an area that has wonderful sound effects. So heading on, before I got there, this was a very warm day. You didn't know. It was anywhere from 58 to 62 degrees, so you weren't sure, when you headed out. This man dressed as Rembrandt in gold. I don't know how he survived it, with a little coin catcher and a little thing there in the bottom. And I took pictures of people, and they took a picture of me. And I asked him, as his other real self, not as his Rembrandt persona, I asked him if he was a painter, if he painted. Staying in the mode of Rembrandt with his accent, he assured me, but of course, I am Rembrandt. Oh, I laughed my head off. It was so funny. And then moved along. Now you cannot take pictures in most of the museums. So after 3 hours in a wonderful experience with Van Gogh, and evidently, he's known for his brilliant color. He did get to know the Impressionists, but Van Gogh veered off into his own unique style, genius, I feel. Not everybody is happy with Van Gogh's paintings, but they are so brilliant and so wonderful that I wrote a piece home about experiencing one of his landscapes, which I have in a portfolio. When I got home, I took all my emails, put them in alphabetical, date order, and that became a sort of diary of the trip. So when I got out of the museum, I was up on a balcony and I photographed that poster, and this is Museum Plain, and that's where the I Love Amsterdam sign is. Many people take pictures there. I think they're removing it. I'm not sure. And I went then, after 3 hours there, to the, I was telling you, lot of the paintings are losing their color, they're vanishing. It may have had to do with oil painting was new toward the end of the 1800s, and some of the color is fugitive. So they are restoring them, and they had one painting example to show you the difference between what it should be and what it was. So, you know, it made me very sad, but I know they're going to restore these paintings so we don't lose Van Gogh. And I wrote a piece about his funeral where he was recognized by his friends that really was just so moving. The Stedelijk Museum, being modern art, they allowed you to photograph. This, there was a young lady, these were glass mirrors hanging, so you became a part of the exhibit. And I'm looking, and suddenly a young woman walks behind the glass, and she's right in line with my image in the mirror. And I wanted to take a picture. She moved. And then for a moment, she moved back, click. Of course, her feet are facing the other way. So I found her, got her email, asked her if she wanted me to send it to her. She and her boyfriend got such a kick out of it. And she emailed me back, and there I found out that she worked for a talent agency in England. She was on vacation with her boyfriend, and they represent some very big name musical people. So I said, if you want me to delete your email, I understand. She said, no, keep it. So I kept it. I haven't done anything with it, but there it is. I took another shot. This man did incredible tension-type suspensions, being an artist. I appreciated it. I was sorry I hadn't taken more pictures and got my own photograph in there. I'm having a ball. They had a special exhibition of Dubufay's art. So I've honed this for the PowerPoint, but believe me, I have more photographs of Dubufay. And this is the iconic structure that you may all be familiar with or not, that he did these constructions. When I left, I'd been 5 hours between two museums. I was exhausted, but I had a mission. Well, this wasn't the mission, but everybody, all the women at work loved Michael Kors. When I saw that poster in the late afternoon sun, I had to photograph it for them. So you never know, serendipity. Now, this was my purpose. I had to go to Vondel Park. I don't know who Mr. Vondel is, but there's his statue. Okay? I had to place a stone that a friend had given me from Coco Beach, Miami, that was on Facebook, and you had to trace the activity of the stone. You had to sign into Facebook, tell them where you found the stone and picked it up and where it was going to be replaced. He said, you're going to Amsterdam, Jane. Take the stone to Amsterdam. This is the only slide with 3 photographs, I think. I placed it below the statue of Vondel where people sit and picnic in the hope that someone eating their sandwich would look down and find that stone. I really don't know because I've never gone back online to trace its activity. But there it was. So I hope you get an idea from the 3 pictures. Now, this was a race on a Sunday when I was going out I decided to go to the windmills. And I'm so glad I took this side trip. You must get out to Markham, to Zanskans. It's a touristy place. This is a place that had 900 windmills in the heyday when Amsterdam was the industrial capital of the world. And they did everything with wind power. Why can't we? Okay, I'm giving you my political point of view. All righty, so but at any rate, now there are 5 and they are national landmarks. So the reason I put this picture in is that I had to go along the pathway to the canal boat that would take me to Central Station for my trip to Zanskans. It's very important to look ahead when you're going to be there to know if there are going to be any events that are going to affect your transportation. That's why I kept these pictures. And the Nigerian guys came in first. And everybody anticipated it because they're excellent runners. But however, that guy on the left was the first, I have to say, white guy who made it across the finish line. And of course, they were applauding the Nigerian runners, such applause, and for the white guy that went, they were applauding. So there's no distinction. And that's true in Amsterdam. It's a very wonderful place. This is a view of one of the canals. I walked along to get my boat. Now I'm in an open boat canal. Okay, and it's a good thing I had my canal pass, so I didn't have to buy it. And this is the beauty of taking the canals. These are shots. And there's a mirror there that if I were to enlarge it, you could see me on the canal boat taking the picture of the mirror. The mirror helps people navigate to know who's coming around the bend, coming from the other direction. And there were people with babies with life preservers in their own boats navigating the canals. So there are a lot of private boats, and you can rent a boat, but you better know what you're doing. Again, the tower and other important buildings. And now I get to Central Station. This is what it looks like, and this is their wonderfully modern trains, leaving the big A, in this case Amsterdam, for a day trip to the windmills. It was a beautiful sunny day, and this station takes you to all parts of the Netherlands and probably on to Belgium and other places. They have a great transportation system. When I go back again, if I can, to see the rest of the Netherlands, I will be taking their regular commuter trains between cities that are only minutes apart, stationing myself in an Airbnb or a bed and breakfast that will be centrally located. I have to admit, 6 days was not enough time for downtime. So anyway, 20 minutes only, and I'm in Zaanskans. Follow the yellow brick road to the windmills. All those tiles take you along. They are known in Zans for their cocoa manufacturing, along with the windmills, and I did buy cocoa there, and some friends have experienced the taste of it. Tastes the same as any cocoa, but they taught me how to make it. You mix it with cold milk or cold water, depending on how you want it. So you make a paste first, then you add the hot liquid, be it milk and then you've got it easily stirred. Okay, this is a picture of the way the windmills looked in the day. I had to cross a drawbridge. I had no idea. I hadn't really researched it. I did do a video, but it's on its side. Never turn if you're doing a video, don't turn it horizontally, even for landscape, because I have no way of turning it upright. Anyway, I thought this would give you the history of what it looked like, and this is what it is today, with only 5 windmills across the Zans River. Once again, I had to photograph the cobbles that date back 400 or 500 years. This is the bucolic scene that you get when you start walking through it. They have farms. They have a museum there with the history of the place. And I fell in love with the landscape. It's very marshy, as you can see, and very typical of what Van Gogh drew and painted in his early years. Some say he was born in Belgium, some in Holland. But Belgium was part of Holland until the war that Holland had with Spain in the 1400s, I think. And then Belgium ceded from the Netherlands, and Andrew might have a better sense of the history.
Actually, during the post-Napoleonic wars, they were united, but they got separated subsequently because the Belgians weren't too fond of the Dutch.
Okay.
Jayne, you had a question, didn't you?
Go ahead, I can't see the hands. Oh, I'm sorry.
What were the windmills for?
When were they made?
What were they used for?
For windmills? For many, many production things. For instance, they had a wood windmill. They had many windmills. They had not only the wood windmill that they would bring logs to, because remember, they were importing oak wood for the pylons that would build Amsterdam and the canals. So they had a very busy wood industry, and all the buildings are out of wood. So they would scrape the wood of the bark and send it into the wood mill. Would come on the the waterways are the highways. So it would come to the windmill, it would be brought up on land, it would be scraped of the bark, brought into the wood mill, and then it would be cut and treated for shipment to wherever it had to go. Not only the wood windmill, but they had paint grinding mills. That's the one I never got into. I want to go back to get in there. Rembrandt would grind many of his own powdered paints because they didn't have oil painting in the 1600s. So they didn't have the oil tubes the way modern artists can avail themselves of that. They had to grind from stone. So lapis lazuli would be a blue stone, they would grind blue. Unfortunately, the white paint was toxic, but they would grind it in their studio. But many would go and purchase it from these mills that were grinding paint for the artists. And today, it's still grinding paint for oils and for textile design. They're grinding. I didn't get in there. I was lucky to get into one mill because I wasted time photographing the landscape from a tower, never got into the museum. And by the time I bethought myself to get over there, it was almost 5 o'clock, and I scooted in with a tour group I actually scooted under a fence and joined the tour group to get into that windmill. After that, it was too late to get into the paint mill because it was closed.
How about regulating the water level? Are they regulating the water level there also?
Absolutely, and not only are they regulating it, but you've got the purest drinking water now, and they've cleaned up the canals. So they have the best water in Europe. I mean, these people are ingenious and brilliant at what they do, and we are hiring them along our coastline where we are getting flooding so that they can, I'm sorry I'm not seeing everybody, but they've hired their engineers from the Dutch engineers to help us reclaim land, you know. So especially with the global warming, whether we believe it or not, it's having an effect, and the Dutch are now spending millions of dollars to add more land for future generations along their coastlines. And Rick Steves has a great PBS documentary on Amsterdam, which talks more about that on the Netherlands. He does two, one on Amsterdam, you might want to see it, and one on the Netherlands. So I'm seeing more and more of Van Gogh, and I did a video on this. This is the other side of the Zons River, so I wanted you to see how beautiful it is. They're turning many of the hotels into apartments. They're not making money with the hotels, but they're going to charge a good penny for those apartments. And you make friends. This woman had just married her husband who took the picture, and we were talking and sharing time, and he took pictures of us. So you do make friends, especially if you're on your own. These two Dutch young people were in the cheese factory, Emporium, and they are my Hansel and Gretel, Dutch style. So I don't know, Hansel and Gretel were Dutch anyway, wasn't it? Who wrote it, Hans Christian Andersen or not?
We got it from Grimm.
Thank you. See, I know I'm so bad. Okay, this is the mill. Now you see there are men attending to it. The guy on the left gave a wonderful tour. And I filmed it, but a woman walked in front of me and I had nowhere to go to get out, and I didn't ask her to move out of the way. I'm filming, you know, you just don't think of it. And this is an old image of the mill. And people worked the mills, and let me tell you, it was not an easy profession. Young boys, men, they could lose fingers. They didn't get much breaks. It was cold in the winter. And they would bring maybe bread and get something hot to drink if they could. But it was a terribly difficult life. And so they lived near it, you know. So, while things are historically fascinating. Now, the concierge warned me not to go on a Monday. One person told me go on Monday. That would have been my last day. He warned me they would be closed on Monday, and Sunday was going to be a beautiful day, go on Sunday. So you see, the concierges can be very helpful. And tourist places. But I saved my last day for the Rembrandt house. And that's what we're going to see now. Last full day. As I say, he lived in the Jewish Quarter. This was the last house because he went bankrupt. Rembrandt evidently had a very bad temper. He lost many patrons due to that, fell into poverty, and had to sell his house. We benefited from that because he had to do a Section 8. Am I behind time?
You're fine.
I'm good? Oh, good. He had to do like, he had to claim bankruptcy, and because of that, he had to make a list of everything in his house, everything. And with that list still intact, they recreated the interior of this house. And they also had, every hour, they did a demonstration in his print workshop. Rembrandt was more well known at the time, you might say, as an etcher. I mean, he was an engraver. That took 17 years of training. He learned it in a year or two. He was brilliant. But really, he did his etchings as drawings. Those were his tools, because then he could sell them for a lot less than a painting. And people, instead of having photo albums to entertain their guests, they would open up their etching albums, which very often had etchings of foreign lands. So etchings were important, and we're going to see how that goes. So like in there, the people were shorter than we are, so doors were smaller, beds were very short. This I thought was a great view to the front parlor, so it let light in. Here we are at the etching, and I didn't know that until I called them when I was there, or I went online when I was at the hotel, and I saw that they did these demonstrations. So Rembrandt's print working room in the house. And this is our wonderful teacher and guide. And this is where he created the etchings. And they have a replica of an old printing press. The felt is what cushioned the roller. The felts went down over the paper, which went over the plate. The plate had to be filed down, or it could cut the paper and the felts. The plates were covered with a tush or a substance that would harden, and he would take a stylus, and any etcher would do that even today, and draw through this hardened surface. By drawing through it, you expose the plate, the silver plate. It usually was aluminum or it was a metal plate. It could be copper. Copper was mostly used for engraving. They used jeweler's tools to push through the copper. It's a much softer metal. But with these etchings, once the plate was exposed the lines were exposed of the drawing, it would go into an acid bath. And then brought out, washed, the covering, the tush was removed, the thick viscous ink was pushed into the lines, the plate was wiped by hand, leaving the ink in the lines. This plate, face up with the lines and the ink, was placed on the bed of the press, the paper was on top of that, the felt on top of the paper, and it was rolled once through the press, and you came out with prints like, that's the plate, before it went through, and you came out with prints you could sell. You'd have to hang them, though, to dry, basically. These are the tools. The one on the right is sort of a stylus. The one next to it to the left with the little bobbed handle is a jeweler's tool for engraving, used for engraving. The next one, going to the left, is another tool for drawing lines, fine lines. The one on the left is fascinating. The bottom part scrapes away an image you no longer want on the plate. It actually scrapes down the lines. The other end of it is a smooth, like a spoon, which smooths out the scraping. He was able to erase whole crowds of people when he thought they didn't give the image to advantage. And by removing them, he allowed the viewer to come closer into the view of what he's shown. So he had flexibility with those tools. And that was the ink, the very viscous black ink, which was used with a spatula to go onto the plate. It was pulled across the plate. So now you have a little history on that. This is the bed that Saskia, his wife, slept in. All people of any financial ability had beds in closets. It had to do with warmth. There was no central heating. A fire was never allowed to go out. People were smaller. They slept upright because they were afraid the blood would pool in their heads and they would die. And to some degree, there was some reasoning to that. We have pillows. They slept at an angle, yeah. And he has an etching of Saskia in that bed. I think she was not well, or maybe she was pregnant. It's hard to say. I don't know if that was the case. But she had one of the house people sitting next to her, and exactly as we see it today. The picture next to it was something I took at the demonstration of paint grinding. Now you can visually understand what I was telling you. All of these containers there could be a lapis lazuli for the blue, and I think the sienna was from sienna-type colored rocks from parts of Italy. And then I think I have it here, I want to remember, the raw pigment would be mixed with linseed oil on a stone with a heavy stone mallet or tool. And then, once it was mixed with the linseed oil, now it's more liquid, it would dry very quickly. So they learned to put it in pigs' stomachs, pouches, that they then tied up and they suspended in water to keep the color moist. And if this is true, they told me that Rembrandt and many famous artists would do skin tone first in mass production in all the paintings they were working on, because they knew it would dry. So they took advantage of its limited lifespan. Then they would take another color and another color. So in a sense, they were mass producing some of their paintings. I don't think this happened in every case, so we can really enjoy a painting for what it is, but I was told that in some cases they would do that. So they allowed us to grind the paint. I had done this in school, in my early years in school at the Temple University, and so I understood the process, and they allowed everybody to take their hand at grinding the paint. These pouches came into play at Beyond Six House, seeing as they were friends behind glass were some of these pouches now hard as a rock. But he must have gotten them from Rembrandt. You know? So there's connection. Here's brushes and a palette. We don't know if this palette is Rembrandt's, but they had it there. They recreated his studio. This is the way they stretched canvas. Today, we pull it across the wooden frame and staple it down. They strung it on thread. The brown that you're seeing is the primer. You cannot paint on linen canvas without priming it, or the linseed oil, the gut, will go right through, dripping down the back of it. That's why you see canvases primed. Some of you may know this already. For those who don't, I'm sharing it. So they did prime it. They primed their canvases. There are some waiting on the side to be used. Okay. Now, the reason I show this, on the left is an etching at the time of that corner of his studio. He had draped a white cloth to diffuse the light and to bring it in so he could work better from the windows. They attempted to recreate the same look in that corner, which I think was fabulous. Now, here you can enjoy the stairs, the narrow stairs in Amsterdam and in all of the Netherlands, in the narrow buildings. Of course, I thought it was a beautiful photograph to show because of the wood. But in actuality, some of the stairs go straight up. Some go around the pole in these homes that you might rent in, so just be aware, they're steep. Okay, I hope I'm not boring anybody. This is my last meal. I asked the concierge, and they sent me to a restaurant I had passed regularly on my walks back to the hotel at night. And I had, again I had salmon, but not in tartar sauce, in mussel sauce. You had a choice. I now realize that mussel sauce enhances the flavor of the salmon, even beyond tartar sauce, which kind of fights it. Fabulous, fabulous flavor, with French fries in that you could dip in mayonnaise, not in ketchup, and a wonderful salad and a glass of wine. And it was a crowded restaurant, and I was the only single person in it. And for dessert, creme brulee with ice cream, whipped cream, a mint leaf, and a cherry. What could be better? So, beautiful Amstel River. My last day was Rembrandt House, and that's when I bought at the markets that were open. And at bookstores, I bought lightweight gifts to bring home to people at work and friends. So this was my farewell selfie to Amsterdam from the bridge over the Amstel. I was exhausted. I don't know if you can see that, but I was a happy camper. And this is, look what happens when you walk too much in Amsterdam. Your feet get tremendous. This was in the hotel, and I used it as a photo op with other guests. So I would recommend Amsterdam. Too long-winded or boring. But if you have any questions, and yeah.
You know, what, did you think about like buying stuff and then shipping it home? Like, is that an expensive?
I think like in this country, you can mail it home.
Right, right.
At the local UPS or whatever. I think you can look into that and definitely do that. People do.
Yeah.
People do. There are some things you cannot buy and bring back, such as certain plants are prohibitive. I learned that on the website for the airline. But otherwise, as you can see, I was careful to travel very light. I did bring back some thin books, like the Jan Six House had a thin, photograph book of the house. And there was one on Rembrandt's painting and how to mix paints and things. I brought that back. And a little book on cooking to friends who cook. So it's up to you. But I was traveling light, as light as I could, Oh, in the safe at the hotel, and I think I did show you the belt, I did keep a copy of my credit cards and my passport. In case I lost something, I would have copies. Not because I could use a copy as a credit card, but, at least if you lose your passport and you also send it to a friend as an attachment in an email so they can copy it out, you're good to go. So I left things in the hotel and I left myself a note. Remember to take things out of this safe, I tried also to make a list of what I packed where, and I had a lot of Ziploc bags with electronic stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a trip of discovery, and a friend had said to me, when you travel, you are growing yourself. You are growing yourself. It is a growing experience. You interact with your environment, and that's why, it's great to take tours. But I wanted to have my own responses to things, And at the Anne Frank house, you could write on their computer for one of the days that she wrote in her diary. And she didn't write every day, but on that day she had written. And you can write your response. And I wrote a little response. Not everybody knew about the computer room, but I was telling people as I left, you can go in there, you can write down what you feel. So, and they make it a part of, instead of a paper log, they make it a part of the visitor's log and what people felt there. So I was thrilled to put something in. Yeah?
What is the best way to get around Amsterdam?
I think now, in retrospect, to buy a bus and tram card for traveling and to get maps of where the bus stops are and where they go and begin to learn. They're all done in color, and I have some brochures back there that have the bus and have the canal rides. So you can buy a travel card when you're in Amsterdam that I think is applicable outside of it as well. But if you're going on a tour, let's say to Markham, as you mentioned, they're going to take you everywhere. So
Is the canal a good way to get around?
It's a very good way to get around, and it's a beautiful way. It's a little slower.
Is it a hop on, hop, you said?
Hop on, hop off, and I have a brochure back there too, and I hope you all look back over there for you can open those folders. And I also had a folder with all the ticket and travel information. That was a little heavy because it's a binder. But I had my Anne Frank card, I had my card into the museums, I had everything there when I first went over and came back. And I changed to a European SIM card. Now, a lot of people don't have to do that, but I owned my phone. I didn't need permission from the providers like AT&T and Verizon to extend to Europe. So when I got there, I found it difficult to send messages through messaging. The hotel wasn't very strong Wi-Fi. So that first night, when I photographed the lovers, I was walking to a electronics store, and they switched out for a European SIM card, gave me back my SIM card. When I got back into JFK, I couldn't use my phone locally. I had to find another electronics store to switch them around. And then I was able to call the driver that I had set up with, etc. And it's just, I found it helpful, but Amsterdam has Wi-Fi now everywhere. Within 2 years of my trip, they were going to have it everywhere. And they had it, but I, chose to get the SIM card. It's an experience, So any other questions that I can help you with? Money, getting over there, being there. But I would extend the time. You cannot do as much as you think you can in 6 days or even a week. So I would extend to 10 days. If you want downtime, if you just want to enjoy being, you need more time. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.